The mysterious story of the Siberian Taiga. The mysterious story that unfolded in the Siberian Taiga began on an ordinary evening. Three travelers sat by a campfire telling stories. Everything seemed fine. They were resting after a long day's journey, enjoying the warmth of the flames and the company of friends. But something felt off. Something was unsettling in this scene. The third participant in this story, for some reason, remained silent while his companions chatted animatedly. What was hidden behind his silence? What secrets lurked in this meeting? The answers to these questions will be revealed to you as you listen to this captivating story until the end. The travelers continued their journey through the taiga, the evening sky above them growing darker, but the firelight kept them warm. They felt as though the wilderness had no end, stretching endlessly in every direction. There were no signs of civilization, no other travelers, just the forest and their footsteps. The silence around them began to feel heavier, more oppressive. Something was wrong. Timur and Vadim kept looking around, feeling uneasy, yet neither of them dared to break the silence. "Do you feel it?" Timur whispered, glancing at the shadows between the trees. Vadim nodded slowly. "It's strange. I thought I saw something move back there, just for a second." Ilya, who had been walking ahead, turned around with a strange look on his face. He had been unusually quiet for the past hour, his eyes darting nervously between the trees. The silence deepened as they continued walking. The forest seemed to be closing in on them, as if it were watching them, waiting for something. The strange sensation was becoming impossible to ignore. As they reached a narrow ravine, Ilya stopped in his tracks. "This is it," he said softly, almost to himself. Vadim and Timur stopped too, both unsure of what to say. They had been following Ilya for hours without question, but now they were beginning to feel the weight of the forest pressing down on them. "What is this place?" Timur asked, looking around. Ilya didn't respond immediately. Instead, he began to walk towards the center of the ravine, his footsteps slow and deliberate. "It's where it all began," he murmured, his voice distant. The ground beneath them felt cold, as if the earth itself was alive, pulsing with energy. The trees around them seemed to shift, their shapes warping in the dim light. "Wait," Vadim said, his voice trembling. "Do you hear that?" A low hum echoed through the trees, as if something deep within the earth was awakening. The sound grew louder, more intense, until it was all they could hear. Suddenly, the shadows between the trees seemed to move. Something was there, something unseen, just beyond the edge of their vision. Then, out of nowhere, a figure appeared before them. It wasn't a person, not exactly. It was more like a silhouette, a shadow that seemed to blend into the darkness around them. "I am the guardian of this place," the figure said, its voice echoing in their minds rather than their ears. The travelers froze, unable to move. The figure gestured toward the center of the ravine, where a strange stone sat, covered in ancient runes. "Only those worthy may approach," the figure continued, its form shifting like smoke in the air. "The forest is not a place for the weak or unprepared." Ilya stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the stone. "We've come this far," he said, his voice steady. "We're ready." As he reached the stone, the air around them seemed to crackle with energy. The runes began to glow faintly, casting an eerie light on their faces. Ilya raised his hands and began to speak in a language they didn't understand, a language older than the earth itself. Timur and Vadim exchanged nervous glances. The hum from the earth grew louder, vibrating through their bodies. The figure watching them faded into the shadows, as if it had never been there at all. For a moment, everything was still. Then, the stone erupted with light, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. Ilya stood there, his hands raised high, his eyes closed, as if in communion with something far beyond their understanding. The light around the stone intensified, and for the briefest of moments, they saw something ancient and terrible, hidden beneath the surface of the world. When the light finally faded, the forest was silent again. The stone was no longer glowing, and the strange hum had disappeared. Ilya lowered his hands, his face pale but serene. "It's over," he said quietly. "We've done what was needed." Vadim and Timur were still frozen, unable to comprehend what had just happened. What was that?" Timur asked, his voice shaking. Ilya turned to them, a strange look in his eyes. "The forest," he said, "is not just a place. It's a living entity, a guardian of the Earth's deepest secrets. We have passed its test, and now we are part of its story." As the travelers left the ravine, the forest seemed to breathe around them, its ancient power lingering in the air. They had been changed, not just physically, but in a way that was impossible to explain. They had seen the heart of the taiga, and they would never be the same again. The wilderness was no longer something to fear. It was a part of them, and they, a part of it. The cycle of the earth, the ancient guardians of the forest, would continue, and they would remember its secrets forever. The end.